Hello, I am so excited to talk to Chris Thornham today. He's the first guy on my podcast.
Hi, how are you? Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
I'm good. I'm good. Okay, Chris, you have an interesting story. Tell us who you are. How did you become an entrepreneur? Just tell us who Chris is.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Canada, in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I have two loving parents who are very supportive. So I was a very curious kid who was loved sports. I did well in school, and then that led me to mechanical engineering in university. I never really loved mechanical engineering, but I was good at math and science, and it just seemed like the logical thing to do. So when I graduated, I went to my first job in actually Las Vegas, Nevada. I worked there in the summers because engineering intern jobs didn't pay very much, but I could work at nightclubs and restaurants, and that paid a lot of money. And since I
Okay,
paid for
not in
my own,
engineering. Okay.
yeah, I paid for my own school because my parents couldn't afford it. So, we could make $300 a night at a restaurant on the strip. So that's what I did. And anyways, did that. And then I remember I got a job in Las Vegas at a wastewater division inside of a civil engineering firm. So I was a mechanical engineer, but we designed water and wastewater systems. And I think it was like the first day or so on the job, I just got there and I looked at what I was asked to do. And I just thought, there is no way I can do this for the rest of my life. And I looked at the cube beside me, and there was a guy who was in his 60s, had been doing the same thing for 40 years. And I just thought, no way, not me. So I didn't really do a lot of due diligence before I got into engineering. So I thought it was something, and it really wasn't what I thought it was. So I should have done some more homework before. But anyway, long story short, I knew right away that I wanted to do something on my own. And, I was a young guy in Las Vegas, and I had gone from spending money and going in debt for 5 or 6 years in college to finally having a paycheck. So for the first while, I went to pool parties on the weekends, and it was fun. But after a couple of months of that, I just realized that if I continued to do that for the rest of my life or for the next 5 or 10 years, that would really get me nowhere. So I just said, you know what, I want to start a business. And what's the first thing I need to learn? And I was thinking of starting an online business with my brother, actually. And I didn't know how to build websites. And this is before site builders and everything. So I bought a bunch of courses on how to build websites, taught myself to build websites. And then we built our first company, which ultimately failed. But the
That's a
lessons
good schooling money.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So ultimately, the lessons that we learned from that experience led us to our second business, which was a carbon fiber bicycle wheel company. So we designed the high-end race wheels that you would put on road bikes or triathlon bikes. You see them in the Tour de France or Ironman triathlons. That business was a huge success. I ran that for about 10 years, and then I exited that at the end of 2019. And now I'm just doing what I'm doing now. So when I exited that, I kind of took a complete turn and said, I'm going to do something different. I've always had a bit of a desire to write a book. And this whole thing started as I want to see if I can write a New York Times bestseller. And how do you do that? Right. So I studied the best writers that I can see. I looked at the James Clears of the world, the Mark Mansons, and like, what did they do? How did they actually go from being a guy who wrote on a blog to having a New York Times bestseller? And what I just realized is that they had put out high quality content consistently over a long period of time. And so I said, okay, maybe I'll write on charisma or something like that. So I thought I would read the top 10 books on charisma, see all the patterns and how they related, and I would just be the charisma guy or something. So I read the top few books. I took a bunch of notes and I refined that all down to its simplest principles. And I realized I could fit that into a couple pages. It wasn't really that in depth. So that got me thinking, if that's this simple, is the rest of this whole self-improvement habits and thing world really not as complicated as some people or some books make it out to be? A lot of books are 300 pages, but they don't need to be. So I started reading a lot and taking a lot of notes, and I started to find connections between things that I didn't think were connected. So I'd be reading a book about habits, and I would notice they would reference a study, and then I'd read a book about communication and relationships, and it would reference the same study, but it kind of in a different way. And I said, wow, this is connected. So I read about 100 books, and then I said, I'm going to simplify some of this and put it together. So I did that, and then I had some holes in what I did. So ultimately, in the long process, I read about 200 books. I took over 1 million words of notes. I refined all that down to about 250,000 words of notes and a central theory of what I think it takes to be successful, kind of in any endeavor that you choose. And I have 5 principles, if you will, of success. And basically, I built a plan for writing about those things and creating videos for about 3 to 4 years. So I have a content calendar that's planned over this very long period of time. I know exactly what I'm going to write about. I have databases that connect all the articles together in different ways. Yeah, so that's what I've been doing. I spent the last year, I took 3 years to get my first article live, but I did all the work in the background. So the first year of writing I have done. The first year of videos is already done. And it took about a year to create all that content. So now I'm releasing that over this year, and I'm now building the second year. I'll release that, and then I'll do the third year.
Okay.
And then the app itself, Awair, is the meditation app that I have.
Talk about the app. Yes.
Yeah. And I'm going to tie this all into that because I know that's where we're going. So ultimately, like, it started as wanting to be a New York Times bestseller and write a book and get to that point. They used to do that on blogs. Now YouTube is kind of the channel to get the audience that you need to attract the attention of a publisher. So very long story short, I also needed to monetize this in some way. And I figured I'm writing all of these things that are that's a lot of useful information. And one thing that I noticed as I was reading about all these topics is that self-awareness is really fundamental in all forms of improvement, self-improvement, just personal, like any type of improvement. And the reason for that is it's really hard to improve if you don't have some sense of self-awareness. So if you hired a photographer to take your family photos, and on their website, they've been to the best photography school and they've worked with the best photographers, then you hire them and they send you the pictures of your family and they're out of focus, the lighting's terrible, and one of your kids is cropped out of the frame. Well, that's an example of you have all of the knowledge, but you're not self-aware enough to recognize when that knowledge applies to what you're doing, right? So you can read a book about habits, but if you're not self-aware enough to know when you're defaulting to bad habits or to change your environment, then reading the book does nothing. You really need some sense of self-awareness to improve at anything. So in my experience, I've been meditating for a couple of years using different apps. I found that meditation is a really great way to improve self-awareness. But what I found with some of the meditation apps that I was using is that the message that they shared at the beginning of most meditation sessions was very repetitive. And after a couple of years of listening to the same thing, I thought it was kind of boring, right?
Yeah.
So I had, tens of thousands of words written on these topics that are helpful, habits and confidence and decision-making and all these things. And I thought, look, if I have a 3,000 piece article on confidence that I've taken from, 10 books on the topic and I've combined it down to the core principles of confidence, well, I can spread that out over 10 individual lessons. And then I can ask a question at the end of each session that promotes self-reflection. So here's what I've taught you. How could that apply to your life? And then I just tie in meditation at the end because I think meditation is just a great way to promote self-awareness. So this whole cycle of educating somebody, getting them to self-reflect and see how that lesson applies to their life, and then promoting self-awareness, I think is kind of a whole encompassing way to help people with self-improvement. So that's what the whole picture is of this project that I've been working on.
Okay, but an app, right? It's like the question I have. Often we are told to start an online business, you need almost no startup capital. So is that true of an app too? Is it slightly more expensive to get started?
I think your startup capital is directly related to the amount of work you're willing to do, right? So if you're scrappy and you want to program the app yourself, programming an app is not that expensive. But if you just want to pay somebody to get it done, then it can get very expensive very quick. I knew the fundamentals of programming when I exited my last company, but in the last couple of years, I taught myself to be a mobile developer for Android and iOS. And then I just went through this process. It took probably about 1,000 hours for me to complete everything. So I taught myself to code. I taught myself to do the graphic design and all the illustrations that sit inside the app, user experience, UX. I did all of that. I just taught myself over a period of time. I'm very stubborn and persistent. And I just built it on my own.
Very systematic and strategic about
I'm an engineer, right?
Like, so it shows, right? It shows.
Yeah, my thinking definitely reflects that of an engineer for sure. I mean, I have databases of everything that connects this whole project over years of time, right? Yeah. But, I think my startup cost for this company, I think I had to pay $30 fee to use one software. And then I had to pay the developer fees for Apple and Android. And that might have been 100 or $200. I think my startup cost for this app, my time obviously, but a couple $100.
Okay, so it's actually a good business model.
Yeah, I mean, if you're willing to do the work, and I think people can start with the fundamentals of programming, learn a basic language like JavaScript or something, just to get the idea. And then I use a software called Flutter. It's Google's programming language, but the benefit of that language is you can develop one code base. It works on Android, iOS, the web, Mac, and Windows, even Linux, I think, with one code base. So you're not developing a code base for Android, iOS, and the web and all these different ones. It's just one code base that makes it simple.
Okay, so I'm curious, do you know the Gallup Strength Finder at all? Do you know that's it's like a personality test that you can take?
Yeah, the ENTJ one.
No, not that.
Okay.
This is like,
okay.
I think it's based in Washington, D.C., which is close to me, and I think they have 42 or something like different personality traits. And I'm just like hearing learner from you and connectedness. It's like I can see the patterns emerging. Are you a learner? Are you like, do you love to learn?
I love learning. I could learn anything about almost any topic. I'm the guy who goes to the party and finds the guy in the corner who never talks to anyone, but I find something very interesting about him and I'll talk to him for an hour. And his wife will be like, no, he never talks to anyone, but I just found something about his job that I found fascinating and I'll learn anything. So I've always been that way. Very curious about pretty much everything in the world.
Yeah. Okay. But now let's return to the app. The one big app that I know that's about meditation is Calm. And somewhere I must have seen a picture on Times Square where they actually have an ad running. It's big. They have a lot of money behind them. And they have big names like, contributing. Was that intimidating to you? How did you overcome that? But they are already in the space. Who's going to buy who's going to subscribe to my app? How did you overcome that kind of limiting mindset?
It's a great question. I think there's this idea in business that you can have the blue ocean product. And what that means is, you're the only person who serves a particular market. And I think that's a good idea on the surface. And I think if you do find a blue ocean, that you may swim in that ocean for a period of time. But if you actually find a good business model inside of that ocean, there's going to be other people jumping in really quick. So it might help you in the beginning, but I think it's better to have a good quality product that people find valuable, that is slightly different than the competition, and just provide good customer service to the customer. And I think overall, if you have that mindset, a lot of businesses can thrive inside the same market, because I think it's almost impossible to be by yourself for a long period of time. So when I started my carbon fiber bicycle wheel company with my brother, there was, there were tons of players, but we found an opportunity. We were looking at designing these wheels, and there were two companies that held a patent on a particular way to design these wheels. And I thought, oh, well, that patent exists. That's a problem. Well, what we realized, I looked into it, is that patent was expiring with that year. So I thought, you know what? These people charge probably 2 to 3 times what we would need to charge. So if we're the first company who takes advantage of this expired patent, we can offer the same product at the same quality for a fraction of the price. And that's what we did. We were the first company to do it. And in the eyes of the customer, a product that cost $3,000 now costs $1,000. That's too good to be true. And because it was, we sold an enormous amount of bicycle wheels in a very short period of time. So I think you have to look for opportunities. I know Calm is huge. I know I'll probably never be as big as Calm. Like I'm not trying to do that, but I think that my product is unique enough to work. I also think that with what I'm doing with the YouTube channel and all of my writing, the goal with that is to attract an audience that would be interested in the products that I'm selling. Mm-hmm. So by putting myself out there and saying, these are the things that I talk about, these are the things that I think are important. We froze. One sec.
Really? Okay. I can still hear you.
Can you still see me?
Yes, I can.
You can see me. Okay, sorry, I froze. So as long as you can still see me, that's what's important. Anyway, I think as long as your product provides value and you put it out there, You may not be the biggest company in the world, but I do think that there's a place for a lot of people in the market.
Okay, but you had that, that advantage with the bicycles, right? With the wheels.
Yes.
So what's your competitive edge with your app? If you were to speak to that?
I think that the thing that I've focused on the most over the last few years is I'm trying to take somewhat complicated topics and I'm trying to simplify them as much as possible. For example, I just wrote an article on grief. I had 50,000 words of notes on grief. And by the time I was done, I condensed that down to about a 3,000 word article without missing any of the important points. So I think a lot of people, if you read, I'm taking it quite a bit, but most books are bloated blog articles, right? They're 300 pages of things that could be explained in maybe 50 pages.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to make the best information available to people who are interested in the topics that I'm talking about. And do I have a huge competitive advantage? Maybe not. I think I'm fairly good at what I'm doing. I think I'm fairly good at explaining concepts to people. And I think ultimately the bigger advantage that I have is by doing this, I will attract the type of audience who is interested in what I'm doing. And if I can do that, then I can design and market products to that audience that they'll be interested in buying.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your marketing strategy. How do you get people to subscribe to this app of yours?
Right. So this is a long-term play for marketing for me. There's several ways that you can market. One is kind of a long approach. So I'm going to release high quality content over a very long period of time. And eventually that should attract a relatively large audience. If you look at somebody like James Clear, he wrote 2 articles per week for 3 years on his blog. After 6 articles, I think he had 100 subscribers.
And that was before Atomic Habits was published.
This is before Atomic Habits. Now, his rule was, I will write every Wednesday, I think it was every Monday and Wednesday or Monday and Thursday, something like that, every week. He didn't care how long it was. He didn't care how good it was, but he just wanted to get in the habit of writing and giving content to people on a regular basis. And over time, he went from like 6 articles, 100 subscribers, but after 3 years, he had 400,000 people on an email list. Now he has power, right? Because if you can convert 1% of 400,000 people, that's 4,000 people.
Yeah.
So if you're charging, $10 a month even, that starts to add up pretty quick, right? Mm-hmm. And then he just kept consistent with it. So that's the first approach, is content marketing, evergreen content that's good value for people over a long period of time. I think the second approach, because the world is very competitive, if you look at the comms of the world, they spend a lot of money on paid advertising. I am not an expert in that. I admit that. That's probably a weakness of mine that I'm currently working on. And the reason that I'm not an expert on that is because my first business that did really well, the carbon fiber bicycle wheel company, our demand was so high that we could never keep up with it. So I never needed to market. I never needed to really do a lot. As long as we had product, we would sell it. So I think as far as marketing goes, I think people have to provide high quality value content to their customers on a long period of time, give them value so that they can see that you can offer them value with your products. And then 2, I think there is a degree of paid marketing that you have to understand and learn. And that's an art form in itself that I fully don't understand yet. So I would be remiss to give you any specific advice on that.
Mm-hmm. And do you think you have to be a little bit controversial sometimes to attract the kind of people and repel others? That's advice that's often thrown out there.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you're never going to please everybody, right? So I think you have to stick to your message and you have to just say, this is who I am. And by saying this is who I am, you will attract like-minded people. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, now you basically have defined your own customer avatar. And that customer is going to want to buy specific products. So for example, I just released an article and a video on infinite intelligence, which is this idea
I saw that one. I was like, okay.
Right? Yeah, there's this idea that there's this source of thing in the as a source of infinite intelligence in the universe, and we can connect to it, and then everything gets easy. I don't specifically agree with that. I think it's not that simple. But there are people like Gabby Bernstein, I think is her name, That's her whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And her clientele loves that message and connects with it. I'm not that person. I don't believe in that. And so that leads me to believe that there are other people who don't believe in that as well, who will appreciate my message.
So it's
So
like
it's not, it's
much
nothing.
more rational
Yeah,
approach.
yeah, because I'm an engineer. That's how my brain works. So it's nothing against the Gabby Bernsteins of the world. I mean, she inspires a lot of people to do a lot of amazing things. It's not that she's wrong or I'm right. It's just a different approach. And this is what I believe. And so that's what I talk about.
So what was the response on that video of yours? What happened in the comments and so on?
I thought it would get a little bit more backlash, but it didn't. I got a lot of people saying this is just great information. I agree. This is what it is. I had one very odd comment that didn't make a bunch of sense, but yeah, so far there hasn't been a ton of backlash. It hasn't been out that long, so it hasn't got all the views I think it will eventually get. But in time, maybe it'll create some controversy, but that's okay, right? Because sometimes controversy can create some awareness of your brand as well, right?
And was it worth your while? Can you see the trend already being higher than a more, neutral kind of video? Was it sounded like almost like an experiment that you ran, seeing if I put out something more controversial, what's happening with your views? Can you see that strategy working?
Yeah. So for my first year, YouTube's a bit of a anomaly, right? Like I think you have to create high quality videos that are engaging, that keep people going. But I also think that there's some degree of YouTube that you just have to put your time in, and eventually the algorithm has to pick you up. I've studied tons of successful YouTubers, and almost all of them have this flat line of views for the first year to 18 months. Sometimes these guys change a lot and then they get their spike, but sometimes they're just consistent. And it seems like for some reason, the algorithm figures you out, what your ideal audience is, and then you just get a spike in growth. A lot of creators start by just putting content out, quantity, and the quality is not that good. I started right away with the highest quality videos that I knew how to make. So most of my videos take 150 hours to make, which is the equivalent of
one video.
For one video. Yeah. So the scripting, I mean, the research behind all of my videos took a year and a half. The scripting for one video can take a week or two, because again, I'm condensing 50,000 words of notes down to a core concept of 3,000 words, and I'm trying to make that as clear and as concise and in a chronological order, a very clear chronological order for the reader and the listener. And then I film them. And then I edit them. The editing can take a week as well. I mean, there's B-roll. I do a lot of animations. If I'm explaining concepts, I'll use Adobe After Effects, and I'll just try to illustrate things and do. Yeah, it's a huge process. But my belief is that effort will pay off over time, and hopefully it leads to a bigger audience.
Okay, so what are your thoughts on AI, GPT, just like speeding up this whole process? You are such a disciplined guy. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this one.
So I've played with some AI writing tools. I have them. I am dead set against using it to write my main content because I believe, I don't know, it just feels like cheating to me. I want those thoughts to come from my mind. I also believe that writing is one of the best ways that you can to think, right? Like it allows me to streamline my own thoughts. It allows me to get really clear on what I'm trying to say. And it just helps me in my personal life as well. I mean, the first section that I wrote about over the first year was all a topic that I call self-management. So it's understanding yourself, your emotions, the strengths and weaknesses of your brain. And if I just use Chat GPT to spit that out, I'm no smarter about that topic than I would have been, had I done the work myself and really spent a year or more breaking all those ideas down to their simplest topics. So I don't think Chat GPT is going to make a lot of experts in the world, but I think it will help experts speed up what they're doing. So for example, if I write a topic, let's say I write about confidence, well, I also have a newsletter about confidence that I post on my website. So if I were to just take sections of that, so it's, I get a shorter newsletter and I posted that on my website as well, Google would count that as duplicate content and then I get penalized for that article or that newsletter getting posted on my website. So if I have to rewrite a paragraph in there to make it just different enough so that I don't get penalized, I might use an AI writing tool to help me reformat a sentence or two.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not wasting time rewriting the same thing I just wrote. I also think, I'm not an expert at this, but I've watched some videos on it. I also think that the smartest people will know how to apply AI to get the most out of their jobs. But again, I think you need the base level of knowledge to even know what to do with these AI softwares.
Yeah, even the prompts that you're giving, you need the background before.
Right. And if you've used them, if I just say, write me an article on habits, and then you read through it, it's not overly coherent. It doesn't flow right. It certainly is not going to get the ideas that you're trying to get across if you have certain things in mind. Like, it can't read your mind. Now, this may get better in time, but eventually, if everyone has access to this, then everything is going to be the same or very similar. And so I think that unique people who try to put a creative spin on things, who try to explain things in new and creative ways, like I'm using animations in videos, and I'm explaining things in ways that nobody has done it before. Maybe the concepts are similar, but the way that I present it visually is different. And I think that's going to be, it's hard to compete against the human element of that.
Yeah, the creativity, it's like that's only possible from a human mind. Okay,
right, exactly.
You seem like a very disciplined guy. So it's like good habits. What's your secret?
I have mastered the art of showing up whether I want to or not. And because I'm a very curious person, I tend to get drawn into all areas, like so many different things. And what I realized eventually is that because I'm interested in this and then that and then this, I never was able to focus fully on a specific thing. So when I exited my last company, I sat down and I asked myself, what are the most important things in my life right now? And over a process of a couple of days, I sat down and I realized that the most important things to me right now are my family, my health, and my career. So that way, what I can do is if somebody asks me to join the HOA board, right, it doesn't fit into those three buckets. So it's a quick no for me. So the first thing I did is I got really clear about what was important for me to do. And then I just show up to those three things, whether I want to or not. So if I don't feel like exercising in the morning, that doesn't count for me. Like, I just get up and I do it anyway. If I don't feel like writing that day, or I'm feeling a lot of self-doubt, I'm like worried it's not going to work, I don't let that overcome me and get me to change what I'm going to do. I just go to my desk and I write. Same thing goes with my family. So my thing is master the art of showing up, whether you want to or not. And I think that leads to a tremendous amount of success over time. It takes time, but consistency pays off.
Okay. Now, you have this interesting little line on your Instagram bio. It's my best ideas are free. Now, we are often, it's like what you said, it's like we create, you create value first and then people pay you. We are often taught that as online entrepreneurs to do that. Do you sometimes worry that you give away too much for free? How do you manage that?
Yeah, it's a good point. But honestly, I think if you watch most of the top influencer content creators online, they're giving away a tremendous amount of value. A popular guy who's come up in the last year or so is Alex Hormozi. I mean, that guy gives more information than almost anybody.
Yes, and great information. It's so valuable.
It's great information. Yeah. And he does nothing but grow, right? So if he can give away that much good information and it hasn't affected him, I don't think it's going to affect the most of us, because I think he probably has more information than most people creating content at this point. But ultimately, I think that if I provide the most value that I can, then my job as an entrepreneur. So if I do that, I'll attract an audience. And then my job as an entrepreneur is to create and design products that I can market and sell to that audience, right? So attracting the audience is one thing, and then selling a profitable product to that audience is a second thing. So my first profitable product would be my meditation app. And the messages that I share in my YouTube videos and in my articles online are essentially the same messages that I add or I share in the app. But on top of that, I add all the self-reflection and the meditation stuff that's separate from the information that I'm sharing. So I'm adding just enough additional value to convince somebody to pay for what I'm doing.
Yeah. So it's like the application almost. It's not, do something with the ideas. And you're
Right.
giving that in the app. You're giving people that in the app. Okay.
Right. And I think the separation is just there's attracting an audience and then there's selling to them. And those are different things. And I think in order to attract an audience, you have to give them a lot of value.
Okay. So, and the other thing that I like about an app, it's like it's a recurring income model, right? I know someone
Yes.
like Russell Brunson of ClickFunnels, he's really big on that. It's not
Yeah.
a one and done. It's like you get, revenue again and again. Was that an attractive idea for you as well?
Yes, of course. The first successful company that I had was a physical product company. There's a lot of headaches that come with that. There's inventory. I mean, you could have $1 million of inventory on your shelf, and if it's not selling, that's a quick way to go bankrupt. So there's always that fear. Through COVID, I actually exited before COVID, but supply chains can affect your business model. There's just so many things that are variable. So ideally, I wanted to create a company that was a digital product that I didn't have to worry about the supply and demand. Ironically, I'm working on another project right now that is a physical product. It's very, very early stage, very back burner at this point, but I may get back into that model because it's what I know and I think it's what I'm good at. But yeah, no, for sure, I wanted there to be a digital element to what I was doing to remove the stress of a physical product.
Okay. And also the recurring income. It's like a subscription.
Of course. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. The recurring model is great. Yeah. Because it just, I mean, if you can convince people to keep signing up and you can continue to provide value. So currently, I think there's 240 meditation sessions on the app. Within a year, within 9 months, basically, there'll be almost 500. And then the third round of content will be 750. So
and,
it grows quickly.
Can they decide on the topic? I want to listen to something about this. So it's up to
Absolutely.
them. Because that's the other
so
thing about Calm. It's just coming up, the daily one. It's like you don't have a say what they are talking about.
Yeah. So if you were to go into my app right now, you would see all the different topics that you can choose to learn about. So let's say you want to learn about self-confidence. Well, I have a whole course on self-confidence. Inside that 10 lesson course, you basically do one lesson a day. I break down pretty much everything that you need to know about confidence in the first 2 to 3 minutes of each session. Then I give you a question that promotes self-reflection based on what you just learned. And then you meditate. Now, some of the meditations are fairly generic, so I can apply those to a lot of different courses that I teach. Mm-hmm. But in some cases, for example, I have one on grief and forgiveness coming up. Well, there's special types of meditation that you can do that specifically work with forgiveness and grief. So those courses will have a special type of meditation for those courses.
Okay, let's talk about the free ideas again. Could you share with my audience your 3 best ideas, just to steal them? Give us a little sample of the kind of things that you think are your best ideas.
I think one of the things that has come up time and time and time again with all that I'm doing is the idea that you can take positive action despite how you feel. So I'll give you a quick story.
The life coach in me is like, no, that's not how you do it.
Really?
Yes, I'm trained to change your thoughts so that you can change your emotions so that you feel better about your actions. But so it's so fascinating to me to see how you are doing it, and it's a completely different way. So please continue.
Okay, so I have a bit of a bone to pick with this change your thoughts to change your feelings idea. I know that's cognitive behavioral therapy. I've got a bunch of videos coming up on this, and I thoroughly explain why I have a bone to pick with this. The reason I have a bone to pick with this is because I think a lot of authors and therapists apply that strategy to everything. But I want to make a clear distinction. Emotions basically come from our thoughts, right? Yeah. But those thoughts can be rational thoughts or irrational thoughts. So this is an extreme example. But if I feel fear because somebody points a gun at me, that's not something I want to change my thought about to change the feeling about. I want to listen to fear. I want to understand what it's telling me. And in that case, it's going to be run away. Yes. But if I have the thought, so in that case, I have a thought that I'm in danger, and that thought promotes helpful behavior, running away. Yes. Okay. And in contrast to that, if I have the thought that everybody hates me, and as a result, I am afraid to ever ask for a date, well, that's unhelpful, because that is an irrational thought, and that thought benefits from change. Yes. Okay. What I don't like is I've been in situations where people have said to me, "You're feeling this way, just change what you think." But it's a rational thought. So if somebody was stealing from my company and I'm upset about that, and then I'm told, "Well, just change how you think about it," that doesn't fix the problem, right? Some problems can't be changed by changing how you think. If I get diagnosed with lung cancer, changing how I think about that doesn't fix lung cancer. Taking logical steps to fix that problem might. Yeah. So I believe that there is an element of this where if your thought patterns are rational, and those irrational thought patterns are causing you to do harmful behaviors, then by all means, address the underlying irrational thoughts. However, there are many instances in life where we're going to feel negative emotions. And because a lot of people think negative emotions are bad because they feel bad. Yes, they do that. I also think that there's this whole narrative in the self-help industry, that psychology, that negative emotions are bad and that we should end them. You see books that says end anxiety.
Let's go for the Pollyanna kind of positive. Let's be positive all the time. No.
But that's just not realistic.
No, we have evolved. I totally agree. We are on the same page here. Yes.
So if you take, I'm going to use an example, Michael Phelps, after 2008, he was quoted saying that he was not motivated. The last thing he wanted to do was swim. He just couldn't stand it. But he chose to get in the pool despite feeling unmotivated. And as a result, he became the most decorated Olympian in history when he went to the 2012 games. So if you're an entrepreneur and you don't feel motivated, you can show up at your desk despite feeling unmotivated, and that will lead to good things. If you have a fear of rejection, you can ask for a raise or a date despite feeling that way. And if you choose actions that promote a better life, you'll get to a better life. But if you let your emotions control your behavior to the point where you take actions that take you away from the life you want, then that's probably the fastest way to steer your life off course.
Okay, that's good. Like we are like 50, 60% there. There are some questions that I would like to ask you.
You go ahead. I have thought about this for probably 1,000 hours. It's like, okay, very passionate for me, this topic. Yeah.
If there's this one sentence that the example that you gave about the lung cancer. Yes, you can't change the lung cancer, but how you think about it, how you frame it, will have a big impact on how you deal with it.
100%. I agree with you 100%. Okay, I'm not saying that mindset doesn't matter. Mindset 100% matters. But you can't think your way out of certain problems. You can't think your way out of a business partner who's spending
but if
company money without approval. Like, there's just no way to do that.
But if you think about it differently, you will have more, like what you are calling more rational emotions that will help you to show up differently. So it's important for me to always realize that you can reframe any situation, and you want to reframe it in a way that you show up as your best. You can't change your circumstances. Sure.
I just don't like the idea that you should reframe a problem in a way that you don't address it, specifically problems that need to be addressed, right?
Yes, but you want to show up with your prefrontal cortex and not your amygdala. So you want empowering feelings if it's possible. But 50% of life is going to be negative emotions. That's just life, and we need the contrast. So I'm not saying let's be positive all the time, but let's be more intentional with our feelings. You want to be 100%. Angry. You want to be angry at a partner who's stealing your money. You want to be angry. Anger is a good response there, but you want to be intentional about as well. Of course, I'm angry.
100%.
This is why I'm angry. So we are probably on the same page, and just like the way that we are telling it. So that's
exactly
for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so sorry, I interrupted you. You wanted to say it's like just show up and do the work, and then you will. That's the one. A free gift.
Right. So my what the first thing that I always say to people is that you can take positive action despite how you feel. And again, I think there is a distinction between rational and irrational. But a lot of entrepreneurs that I talk to, like I just spoke at Cal Poly, and a lot of the kids there were saying, how do I just don't feel motivated. How do I get to work? And the answer is, you're not going to feel motivated all the time. But if you want to be successful as an entrepreneur, you have to learn how to get to work, even when you don't feel motivated. And this applies to almost every emotion, right? You can, like I said earlier, you can feel a fear of rejection, but ask for a raise or ask for a date. And if you choose those actions that lead to a better life, most often it helps you get to a better outcome in life.
Okay.
Another concept that I would say comes up over and over again is the idea that we all have a singular purpose, right? And I just think for most entrepreneurs, that's a terrible concept, because what it does is it keeps people frozen in time. So they sit there and they think, okay, I have to come up with the perfect thing that I'm going to do for the rest of my life that is going to leave my mark on planet Earth. And what happens is they can't, that's a lot of pressure, right? And then they can't figure out what that is. And as a result, they do nothing. So in my experience, a lot of entrepreneurs have this question before they actually know how to be an entrepreneur. They don't know how to sell, how to market, how to design a product or build a website. So the first thing I would say is just get the skills, the basic skills that you need to become an entrepreneur. And then if you acquire those and you still don't know what to do, then I always say that life is not a singular purpose. It's a series of chapters. And if you look at your life, you were in kindergarten, and then in elementary school and middle school, and then high school, right? You went from being a child to a teenager to a young adult to maybe a parent of your own and then a grandparent. So life is chapters. So what I say to people is stop thinking of your career as a singular purpose. And instead, if you want to be an entrepreneur, just follow interests. And what interests do is they keep you going. So I learn about something. And maybe because I learned about that, that uncovers a stone that I would have never seen had I not taken that first step. Mm-hmm. And I think it's the series of curiosity and thinking and looking and moving around that eventually gets us to the thing that we end up doing, right? So most of the time, a lot of the time, I think, you would never be able to understand what you're supposed to do until you take all of those steps and discover things along the way that teach you ultimately where you're going to go.
Okay, but
final thing.
No, I have a question about this one, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Like, okay, you said one of the things when you exited your previous company, you decided these are the 3 things I want to focus on. How do you blend that? Like, is it not the same as interest? What are those? Are those values? You are single-minded, but you're also open-minded. How do you marry those two? Because you are doing that. And amazing.
Sure. Thank you. Values, I think, are different. Values are something for me, like I will do things honestly.
Okay.
Those are big overall things that never have an expiration date. I will be honest. I commit to being hardworking and to putting family first. Like those are values.
Okay.
Interests to me are, I want to start a business and I don't know what I want to start, but I know I'm very interested in writing. Okay. So what does it take to be a writer? I don't know. So who are the best writers that I can think of? Okay, let's use James Clear as an example. He was the guy that I really looked up to when I started this. So I studied James Clear to the nth degree. When did he start writing? How did he get to his 400,000 subscribers? Who are his editors? I now talk to his editor once in a while. Like we've connected and we talk. And I'm nowhere near writing a book, but like he's a nice guy. He's super intelligent, and he's actually starting a business too. So I noticed that James Clear networked and he built this audience, and that took me down that path. And then I realized that YouTube was probably bigger. So what did I do? I said, okay, well, who are the best YouTubers in this space, and what do they do, and how do they do it? Okay, well, that means I have to learn how to film, how to edit, how to do sound design, how to do lighting. Like there's all this lighting I have set up right now. There's a 3-point lighting system in this room, right? And so that I learned 8 Adobe softwares just to start this company. But I didn't know I needed to do that when I started. So I think the point of following interest is you just keep going. You're like, okay, this is interesting to me. And sometimes that leads to a dead end. And that's okay. But that dead end might tell you, oh, I got to go over here and maybe I'll try that. And this other company I'm working on behind the scenes right now, I had a question about something. I got stuck with marketing on this company. And I said, well, do you have to have a unique product? And I looked at the Liquid Death Company, which is the company that sells canned water.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, they sell water, but they did $700 million in sales. So
Wow.
that's not about the product, right? That's all about marketing.
Mm-hmm.
So what do they know about marketing that I don't know about marketing?
Okay.
And then that idea led to this whole other idea. So I think as an entrepreneur, like that's the journey, right? It's just being curious, looking at things, and eventually finding something that works. And it takes a while, but that's the process.
Single-minded too. That's like
Of course.
It's both of them are true at the same time in one person.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Right. I'm single-minded about entrepreneurship and business. So as long as it's in that realm, I'm doing it. I love to play guitar and I've played it for years, but for the last couple of years, I've said, I'm not going to play guitar because right now I have a 2-year-old. I'm fairly newly married. I don't have time to play guitar because I don't think it adds to what I'm ultimately trying to achieve in my life right now. So the single-mindedness comes in, I exercise, I spend time with family, and I work. And as long as something I'm doing contributes to potentially working or creating a business or having more income, I will do it. But if it doesn't right now, most of the time I don't.
So it's almost like you created 3 buckets for yourself. And as
100%.
In those, I have all the freedom in the world, but I'm not going to add more buckets to my life.
Right. So if my wife says to me, family's in town, or it's somebody's birthday, or this is what, like, there's no question in my mind, I'm going to do that. And I just show up. All I say is tell me where and when to be, and I'll be in. And I'm really good at it. If I want to work 10 hours one day and my wife needs me here at 8 a.m., I'll get up at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. to make that happen. I just fit everything else in my life around those 3 buckets, and I make sure I'm consistent. Yeah, I have to be consistent. That's my big rule.
What's your third tip? I interrupted you again. What you wanted to share?
My third tip would be, I had a lot of students when I was in this presentation ask me how to become more confident. And I think that confidence and self-esteem are very similar things. And back in the 80s, there's this whole idea with the self-esteem movement that we could just give people self-esteem and self-confidence, right? You just pump them full of, you're amazing and you're special. And
affirmations,
you can do it.
Yes.
Affirmations. I have a bit of a bone to pick with those as well.
Me too.
And I think, okay, good. We're on the same page with that. So
on that one.
I really believe that we're not stupid, right? So if I sit in front of a mirror and I say to myself, I'm a multi-bajillionaire and I'm the most successful businessman in the world, I know that's not true. And I'm not convincing everybody.
Yeah.
What I've learned, I'll give you an example. If I asked you to brush your teeth right now, would you feel nervous or unconfident about doing that?
Yeah, sure.
You would feel nervous about brushing your teeth?
On a camera? Be in front
Not on a camera, just on your own in the bathroom.
No, I've done it so many times, no problem. Yes.
Exactly. And the reason for that is because you have so much experience with that, it becomes second nature. So I had a student who is about to go into the work world when I was at Cal Poly. She said to me, I'm starting a new job in the next few months, and I feel really unconfident about it. How do I feel more confident? And my answer was, you really can't, right? And the reason for that is because you have no experience. Like, you're showing up to your first job out of college. You don't know what the job entails. You don't know the skills that are needed. You don't know the people. You don't know if you're going to have good interactions. But I said, look, show up to the job, understand the training, do the training, learn the tricks of the trade, the tools of the trade. And I said, eventually, 6 months in, a year in, you're going to feel more confidence. And the main point with this is that confidence is not something that somebody gives to you or something that you read from a book. It's something that's earned, right? And unfortunately, you have to put in your reps to get to the point where you feel confident. And I think that's a big misconception. And I think it holds a lot of people back. Mm-hmm. But, ultimately, I just think you got to put in your reps to get the confidence, and eventually it shows up.
It almost is like the first one that you said. You don't have to feel good to do something. You can.
It really ties into that concept for sure. Yeah, you can show up and do the things. I also said to the girl, this is another point, but there's a lot of confidence in humility. right? So if I show up to a job and I'm the new guy and I'm just out of college and I show up, I know everything and I'm going to be great. And I'm trying to fake confidence and I'm trying to be the best guy in the room and all that. Everyone's going to read through that.
Yes.
I'm not going to be well received. The response I get from people is going to make me feel less confident, right? Because nobody's looking at it. But if I just show up and I say, look, I don't know all the answers, but I'm willing to learn. And this is important to me. And I want this to work. The way that you're going to be received is, I like this guy or this girl. They seem like they're honest and humble. And I'm going to do everything in my power to help them. That's going to get you to confidence way faster than trying to fake it until you make it, or just be this person that you're not, and or telling yourself that you're the best, salesman in the room when it's your first day on the job. It doesn't work that way.
Chris, we've run way out of time.
That's fine.
Thank you so much for doing this. Okay, now the final question: where can they find you? On YouTube, on Instagram?
Yeah,
and we will link it in the show notes as well. So, but tell them anyway.
Yeah. So my website where I write everything and post all my videos is christhornham.com. My YouTube channel is just Chris Thornham. If you want to support me, just subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's the main thing I'm trying to do now, is just build an audience. I've got a newsletter on the site. You'll see all that when you go to the site. And then my meditation app is Awair, AWAIR.app, APP. And you can find that there.
Okay. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. I really appreciated it.